our Executive Director, for a quick welcome.
Super. Yep. I wanted to just welcome everyone really quickly. And I know many of you already are familiar with ReFed, but just for those who don't, I want to take a moment to introduce our work. ReFed works to motivate and mobilize the many stakeholders across the food system to advance solutions to reducing food waste here in the US. We have a fairly holistic view of the food system. And so with that, we really serve to act as a catalyst to promote solutions-driven action, a connector facilitating collaborations and partnerships between stakeholders, and a clearinghouse for data and insights about the issue. We certainly have found ourselves doing all three of those things as part of our response to the pandemic, and we hope that we can do some of that today. So with that, I will pass it back to Jackie, and just thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Great, thank you so much, Dana. Well, welcome to installment 2. I'm really excited to be continuing the discussion series. Do see some familiar names on here, and I know this is also the first time for several people joining, but this is part of our Better Together Food Systems Best Practices for Navigating COVID-19 series. We are continuing, I think, every day and every week to learn and adapt as we're getting additional insights from our community. And we've really enjoyed so far hearing from the experts throughout our network about the best practices that they're implementing across the supply chain, and look forward to doing that additionally with our panelists today. Last week, we talked about logistics, and we heard a lot about innovative ways to start getting food to people who need it. Sometimes that involved creating new supply chains. Today, we're going to focus really on keeping those existing supply chains healthy and open, primarily through addressing labor challenges. So I think this is probably a personal issue, either directly or indirectly, for everyone, knowing someone in their families, their friends, or their community that have been hit by the wave of unemployment because of the pandemic. Meanwhile, some sectors, including food recovery and retail, are seeking additional labor and or volunteers to meet the record demand that they're facing. So we're going to hear about those challenges as well as some of the solutions that are being implemented from our panelists today. Before we start, just like last week, I'd love to give ourselves and especially our panelists a view of who's on the phone. So Nathan, if I can ask you to bring up our quick poll, I'm going to ask everyone to take a look at what just popped up on your screen, and please select the sector that best describes your organization. Not the most intimate way to connect, but hopefully something to give us all visibility to who's on the line. Still see those coming in, but we've got a pretty good spread across various sectors on the line today. This is great. Okay, thank you so much. That's helpful, and we appreciate getting that little bit of insight. So we are going to first hear from our 3 panelists who are finding solutions to the issues of labor. I just want to say again, our goal here really is to enable and empower everyone to be doing better through this time. So I do ask is we allow for questions and comments throughout the course of this discussion that you direct them to that with that end in mind. But let me introduce our panelists. First, we have Catherine Miller, and feel free to give a little wave if you want, panelists, as I introduce you. We have a very strong group of women leaders on the phone today. So Catherine is the Vice President of Impact at the James Beard Foundation. She leads all of the James Beard Foundation's social impact programs, including the National Scholarship Program, Environmental Sustainability Initiative, and Education and Advocacy programs. We have Denise Osterhus, who's Senior Director of Sustainability and Community Engagement, at the Kroger Company. Denise leads Kroger's sustainability, philanthropy, and community engagement efforts as part of the corporate affairs team. She also leads Kroger's Zero Hunger, Zero Waste social impact plan, the company's commitment to help create communities free of hunger and of waste. And last but not least, we have Melissa Speisman, the Vice President and National Site Director for Food Rescue US. She has spent over 25 years as a hospitality and nutrition professional. And at Food Rescue US specifically, she has helped to expand the organization nationally. And now site directors and volunteer food rescuers have rescued and delivered over 39 million meals and kept 52 million pounds of food waste out of landfills. So a great panel that we have on the phone today. I'm going to share just 2 very related questions as a prompt to get things started. and we'll ask our panelists to go in that order and spend a few minutes talking about their work. Just a reminder to everyone on the phone, starting anytime, you can submit questions through the chat function, and we'll be monitoring that and asking those on your behalf after each of our panelists have given their comments. So the questions are: first, what labor challenges are you seeing across the supply chain as a result of COVID-19? And then second, what are the scalable solutions or innovations that your organization is implementing? So with that, Catherine, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie and Dana and the entire ReFed team for having us. And thanks to all the people on the line today. It's actually pretty exciting to see that audience poll and the high number of folks who are representing government or different offices here, given that how much of our work at the James Beard Foundation right now is really focused on policy advocacy at the state and local level in support of folks. To the big challenge, labor challenge for us in the restaurant community. The James Beard Foundation, we're a 30-year organization. We've largely maybe been known for our awards that recognize culinary excellence in the world, but over the last 5 or so years, we've really been focused on promoting a greater deal of sustainability, both economic and environmental, amongst the restaurant community, and also highlighting leadership roles and opportunities for people to engage in a different way, both as restaurant workers and as customers of restaurants. And, you know, I was jokingly saying to somebody, well, not so jokingly saying to somebody, that probably the biggest thing that's happened is over the last 6 weeks, my job has completely changed. And the reason that my job has completely changed, it makes us a really dramatic example of when we have a fragile food system at all levels, from farmers and fishing communities to restaurants to consumers, is that of the 22 million new job claims that were unemployment claims that were filed last week, over 8 million of those are restaurant workers. So restaurant workers, everything from the chef to the bar back to the kitchen support to the dishwasher, all of those people are now unemployed and may not have jobs to come back to, depending on whether this is an elastic economic situation or whether it is a lasting economic situation. And so our work at the James Beard Foundation has really moved and shifted over the last 6 weeks to figure out, one, how we support the industry to come back and to come back differently, to come back as the type of industry that we want to be, one that is really focused on environmental sustainability, that is focused on employee retention, is focused on professionalism, is focused on community engagement, but also dealing with the fact that those 8 million restaurant workers, and that doesn't even include, those are just the restaurant workers, that doesn't include the other people involved in our food system. It doesn't include the farm workers, the food supply folks, the other aspects of the workforce for us that are involved in that. But those folks, the restaurant workers, are now amongst those newly food insecure, and for the first time are amongst that community, really accessing benefits, whether they be state, federal benefits, at a much more accelerated level than ever before. And so we want to make sure that we are there as an organization to not only support the continued operation of the best-in-class restaurants that are focused on really being good actors for people, planet, and the community, but how do we support that workforce moving forward? And so, you know, the scalable solutions that we're really looking at are policy. We've been heavily involved as a nonprofit organization in the advocacy efforts to expand unemployment benefits, to expand access to SNAP, to expand and fund various programs to support local farmers, and also to support the lift up and stabilization of America's small business and community, including the nearly 400,000 small independent restaurants around the country that really are on every one of our street corners. We've been heavily involved in that. We were a founding member of an organization called the Independent Restaurant Coalition, but we've also been working with the Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and a host of other organizations and groups. The other pieces is the support piece and the education piece, really supplying essentially every day we have a webinar series like this for members of the food community. They can have a cocktail or a non-alcoholic cocktail together during quarantini hour on Fridays, but they can also learn about PPP and small business loans and different community-based solutions throughout the week, every day at 2 o'clock. We also are producing toolkits and a variety of things on how people can pivot, turn their restaurants into grocery stores, turn them into emergency feeding centers for school children, for our most vulnerable and food insecure. We've also been sharing information on how chefs and restaurants can actually buy directly from farmers in their community and or from grocery store suppliers in their community, and then turning their own stores into grocery stores. So, you know, the response of the chef community has been pretty powerful in that way. And then we're really looking at how we might work with the greater philanthropic community to develop public-private partnerships at the community-based level and at the federal level that are really focused on not only reopening these small businesses at every aspect of the food system, but also then enabling them to continue their great work focused on environmental sustainability. And, you know, it is Earth Day. You know, we are doing this on Earth Day. And so we've been also very excited over the years to work hand in hand with ReFed, particularly around food waste. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is also the scalable solution is how we can maintain momentum on that during this time. And, you know, it's really in partnership with organizations like ReFed, like Kroger, like Food Rescue, to really bring those things together. And the last thing I'll say is I want to give a couple of chefs sort of driven shout outs to folks that are really have done some very incredibly innovative things. So we're looking at the Lea Initiative based out of Kentucky that has been working with a number of corporate sponsors and partners to build supply kitchens and supply houses for the restaurant workers that are unemployed, those 8 million folks. So that is now happening in a myriad of communities around the country. We're looking at folks like Off the Plate that are repurposing food potentially otherwise wasted and turning it into meals for first responders, including hospital workers in cities from Boston to Chicago to San Francisco and DC. And then there's that community of organizations such as the Durham Hotel in North Carolina, the Boca Group in Chicago, the Honey Butter Fried Chicken also in Chicago, the Restaurant Coalition in Seattle, who are also building those community-based grocery stores into their kitchen and restaurant models and making sure that vulnerable communities have our food is accessible to them. So, you know, it's hard for us right now as the restaurant community because we're not looking at the jobs, not looking at creating jobs at the moment. We're looking at to preserve the jobs that we have and to provide for not only our workforce that is currently unemployed, but also the community around it. So I just thank you for this forum and look forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Denise, to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Let me know if I think I'm off mute. So good afternoon, I guess, or good morning, depending on where you are. But thanks to Jackie and our partners at ReFed. We so appreciate you guys, your leadership, and this opportunity to connect. So as Jackie said, I guess I would say our team leads Kroger's sustainability and community engagement work. And what that really means is both material ESG topics that we manage and report on, but also we're driven by our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste social impact plan. So, and that's really our commitment to create communities free of hunger and waste. And I would say in general, we spend a lot of our time, most of our time, focusing on how to direct more meals to feed people in our communities. And that could be food, also funds. So also the work of the foundations, we have 2 now. And what we think right now, seeing everything happening in front of us, is food access is critical and is definitely one of our high priority topics. And we think Zero Hunger, Zero Waste has really never been more relevant than it is today, unfortunately. So for a bit of perspective, I would say that Kroger has a deep experience in preparing for and responding to disasters. We are often a first responder. Kroger teams are often the first allowed back into a community, for example, after a storm, to get stores back up and running so that people can get the food and essentials they need. This situation with COVID-19 is different. It's something new, so we continue to learn, but particularly because it's affecting all of our communities at the same time. So, and also, you know, in the US, but also in our global supply chains. So unlike when a city has to recover from a storm and we can divert resources, whether that's people or product, from one market to another, in this case, it's happening all at the same time. So it's definitely been a challenge. So I just want to mention 3 things specifically that we've been thinking about on our team in case they're helpful for the discussion today. And that would be number 1, we think protecting the safety and health of our associates and customers is our top priority. We decided early on that probably the single most important mission we had when the pandemic was beginning and the outbreak was starting to hit the US was to keep our stores open, stocked, and clean for our customers and associates. So we wanted to make sure that we serve that an essential community service, staying open and give everybody access to the food and essential items that they need as much as possible. So recognizing though that means that our workers are in our grocery stores are front line. They are on the front lines, and we are truly grateful for everything all of our frontline workers are doing, including healthcare workers, first responders, and our grocery store associates. But in addition, the folks that are also on the call today talking about what their people are doing. And that includes volunteers who are working at food banks, people serving meals, etc. We really appreciate all that work. Yesterday, we shared a blueprint for business that captures a lot of what we've learned so far in case it's helpful for other businesses. It outlines a lot of the decisions and steps we took to keep our stores open and to recognize and reward our associates for their service. So we've taken a lot of steps to protect customers and associates in our stores. And those include, you know, things that you would expect and that you've seen if you've been out shopping in one of our markets. We have 2,800 stores across the country. You know, that's reminding everyone of good health habits and hygiene, stepping up our cleaning and sanitation, encouraging physical distancing through signs and floor decals, and also limiting customer traffic. We've had to be creative and test some new things too, like one-way traffic in our store aisles. And as you guys probably are using, we have seen a tremendous surge in online orders and demand for e-commerce. So we've stepped up also and expanded our pickup and delivery services. We waived our pickup fees, and we're ramping up plans to, you know, accept EBT payments at curbside pickup, which we're really excited about too, for food access. We also converted one store in Cincinnati to a pickup only location. So trying to give ourselves an idea of whether that model would be truly helpful in meeting the demand in the market. So we're still learning a lot, but that is one thing we could possibly scale if we need to. But I would say our associates, again, are really the true heroes. And so we've taken a lot of steps to recognize and reward them. And those include, you know, putting in place emergency leave guidelines for affected associates, providing additional pay, like a one-time bonus for hourly frontline workers. And then on top of that, a hero bonus of a $2 an hour premium, which was just extended for a little bit longer. So we're continuing to learn as we go, and we're not, you know, nobody I think is really sure what the next couple weeks hold either. So we're trying to be flexible, pivot, use practices that we've, and best practices we've had in the past that we can apply to the current situation. One of the other things we did quickly was when those first couple weeks of panic buying, or we'll call them stocking up, were happening, we learned we needed to reduce our operating hours in our stores, because closing then overnight, even for some of the 24-hour stores, gave our associates a chance to rest, and it gave us an opportunity to clean and replenish inventory and get ready for customers the next day. So a lot of these things are a little bit new. All of the physical distancing was new, and it really accelerated the work that we've been able to do on our pickup service. So I would say another way we had to flex our model a little bit was in how we hire, onboard, and train associates. And I don't live in that world every day, but in the past, we've often done mass hiring events. And so we kind of had to activate that sort of process. And again, do some massive interview days and then onboard and train associates quickly who wanted to work. So I think we hired more than 60,000 workers nationwide recently. And that was partly by forming employment partnerships with local, regional, and national businesses from some of the hardest hit industries. So hospitality, food service, restaurants. So where people truly wanted to work, we had jobs. So happy to play that role as well and pivot and give people a chance to work. The other area I would mention is more tied to zero hunger, zero waste, and that is food rescue. So, the challenge has been a little bit in how we've all had to change how people get food, and especially the charitable food system. So, and really to the point of ReFed convening this discussion, it's heartbreaking to see miles of cars in line at a food bank and knowing that many people need food, yet also hearing reports of food that may be in the field and not able to be harvested, or people dumping milk, or any of those stories that are circulating here and there. So, and then at the same time, our associates who we rely on to execute our food rescue system in our stores are also, very busy taking care of our customers at the same time. We also, just to be clear for everybody, our food rescue program focuses on perishable donations. So we really focus on the fresh departments. So high value, high nutrition proteins, produce, et cetera. And at this time, a lot of our food bank partners are really looking for shelf-stable food, which is not typically what we donate. Because we sell through it, it's in the center of the store. But at this moment in time, the demand is to be able to package prepackaged boxes of shelf-stable food that they can easily hand to folks as they drive up and then go through the line. So I think we're all learning as we go, and I think that will continue. Our biggest opportunity, I think, is understanding how we can kind of flex and learn from the partners that are on the phone, all of you and others, on how we can kind of create a new charitable food system going forward, building on the best practices of the past, but then maybe also discovering some new and innovative ideas. We've directed some funding to some of our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundation innovators. So some of our grant recipients from the Innovation Fund. Last year, we have directed some additional funding to them because they had really awesome ideas for helping redirect surplus food to people who need it. So happy to talk about any of that as well, but those are kind of the things that we are talking about every day.
Great, thank you, Denise. And just a quick reminder before we go to Melissa that you can continue to supply questions through the chat function. Just make sure you're sending those to Angel Vesta. Thanks, and Melissa? Round us out here.
Thank you so much. And thank you to ReFed for bringing this group together. Just so exciting to know that there are at least 500, if not more people out in the country, in the world, I guess, that are so concerned about the issues of food waste and bringing food and the food systems together. So at Food Rescue US, we don't have labor force in the traditional sense because we use volunteers to transport our food. And although many organizations are claiming that they're shutting down because they don't have access to their normal stable of volunteers, we've seen across the board that more and more people are stepping up to volunteer. I think they're looking for ways to give back in their communities, as well as people who are home and are thinking about the basic needs of food and shelter, and understanding that by participating with us in as little as 30 minutes, they're able to get food to agencies that are serving people in need. And of course, we are following all of the CDC guidelines with social distancing, gloves, masks, dropping off food, outside of agencies and picking food up outside of businesses. And what we've also been seeing is that the agencies that we are traditionally serving, the need is continuing to grow. So not only are there the traditional clients that they've been serving being served by this food, but the numbers of people that are in need keeps growing. So it's, as everybody's mentioned here, it's the hospitality workers, it's furloughed and laid off employees from the retail sector, from not only hospitality when we think about restaurants, but all the hotels that have shut down because of business travel. One of the largest companies that we work with, somebody that I've worked with for 12 years was just furloughed this week. So I think that the furloughs and laid off employees are being impacted at every level of the system. And I think that people who never even thought about food access are starting to think about it now. And what we have had to do is think about where our traditional model would be food recovery. So food, as Denise mentioned, fresh food that would be wasted at stores, at the retail level, restaurants, corporate dining, schools, hospitals, stadiums, convention centers. Most of that food is not flowing through the system as well. But what we are seeing is a lot of community and individual support. So communities, individuals stepping up and saying, what can we do to help locally here in our community? And we've shifted the work that we're doing a little bit to community kitchens and restaurant partnership programs where we're able to pay these restaurants and these community kitchens to keep their employees working, to keep the food and supplies flowing through the supply chain, and thereby able to keep those businesses open while transferring this food to the agencies that we're serving. So communities are really stepping up. They're really looking for creative and innovative solutions in their communities for how they can keep these restaurants open. I think it's really important at the community level to understand what's happening to those restaurants and to the hospitality business as a whole, and then to understand that the need will continue to grow. And I think even today we were just talking about, you know, this very short period, or it seems like forever, but it's been a very short period of time that we've been in this phase of the pandemic, but there will be all of the rebirth and regrowth that will happen on the other end of this, where there still will be people in need and still will be people that are out of work and still need access to food. So across the country, we've been partnering with groups such as World Central Kitchen in Miami. We're looking at a couple of other locations to be working with them. In Columbus, a big group of businesses, not only food service businesses, but corporations, got together for a program. We're all in this together to, again, raise funds, keep food flowing through the labor force in the restaurant industry. We've had companies stand up and say, we want to keep our food service company in business, and we're going to pay the chefs, we're going to pay for the food, we're going to pay to have this food delivered out into our community. So we're really seeing a lot of community support, and because of the way that we work within our communities, we've been able to uncover a lot of need that we didn't even realize was there before, and a lot of different agencies that are supplying food to people in need. And we're really proud to be able to do this work at the community level across the country. And very early on in the pandemic and in the shutdown, we applied to be considered essential workers because we really do believe that the food that we're providing and the services that we're providing are essential to the communities that we're working in.
That's great. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you to all of our panelists. We have several questions coming in. Just a quick reminder to other participants as well, you can also start sharing best practices through the same chat function to Angel. If you'd like to get those out there, we'll transition to those later in the call. But let's start with some questions. So Catherine, I'm actually going to go to you first. There's a very tactical question of whether your webinars that you mentioned are open for government or others to join. And then maybe a little deeper question to go into is just a little more detail about the initiative that you mentioned in Kentucky.
Sure. So our entire webinar series is free to everyone. You can register for it at jamesbeard.org. And so they're open to anybody who wants to enjoy them. And we've had things on technical corrections to the PPP, to the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Programs. Next week, we have Representative Shelley Pingree joining us. During the week, we're doing them on how to reopen your restaurant. So a variety of topics, all that can be found on our homepage at jamesbeard.org, and they are all free to register for. And they're pretty much every day. In May, they'll probably move to a couple times a week, but right now they're every day at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the Lea Initiative is an initiative outside that was grown out of Kentucky by Chef Ed Lea. He's a James Beard Award-winning chef, and his executive director, Lindsay. They created an organization that originally was a mentorship organization for women in Kentucky who then could find unique job experiences outside of Kentucky with the intention of coming back in, so that, you know, a chef in training could go get amazing training and mentorship from another James Beard Award winner in another part of the country and come back. Immediately following the shutdown of Kentucky's restaurant industry, they reopened each of Ed's restaurants with support from Maker's Mark, I think US Foods, and a couple of other food companies, and started feeding unemployed restaurant workers. So one of the hidden, I'd say, casualties or hidden groups of people are a whole host of people that depend on what we call in the restaurant industry family meal. So sometimes once, twice, as many as 3 times a day, a restaurant will feed its staff. And it's usually the opportunity to go over the shift, what specials, to build some community. And when restaurants closed, that opportunity to get a nourishing and a nourishing meal disappeared along with it. So the Lea Initiative, so Ed Lea and Lindsay, they essentially turned their entire restaurant system around in Kentucky, created grocery stores specific for restaurant workers, and started feeding restaurant workers out of those locations. That's now grown into probably, I think at the time, 15 cities, possibly, I think as many as 15 cities right now, probably more. And each restaurant, in much the same way that some of the emergency feeding is happening, the restaurants that are participating are provided with grant money to fund family meals for unemployed restaurant workers in the city. So it's happening all over the country. And you can visit Lea Initiative, the Lea Initiative website to find out more information, but we love it.
Great.
That's great. Thank you, Catherine. This question came in for you, Denise, although I think everyone can probably have an opinion or a voice on this one as well. But there's some questions around how you've had to shift hiring and or volunteer sourcing virtual, and whether or not there's any, virtual systems or, virtual hiring events, or just what you had to do without the in-person aspect. And Denise, I know you said you don't work in this every day, so feel free to comment if you can, or if that's a follow-up, we can share our information later too.
Yeah, and I will have to, I say that's a great question. I think we have had some, we've had a virtual recruiting call center for several years. So we have done some centralized hiring work. And so I think we leverage them. I know in the past, when we've had hiring events before, we have had them in person. And actually this time, I don't know that they were all in person, but I know some locations in some of our divisions still had in-person hiring events. It was interesting though, I saw a line from one of the parking lots where people were lined up, and they had actually people out there monitoring for physical distancing. So it was done very carefully where we did have in-person hiring events. And so in terms of whether we operate the entire process virtually, I'd have to double check on that. I'm not sure.
Melissa or Catherine, anything you want to add from a virtual kind of recruitment topic?
Right. For us, our volunteers are always virtually recruited. So we've just been able to see the influx of volunteers into all of our locations, just people really stepping up.
Yeah, and I think with all of the initiatives at the local and community level, we're seeing all that happen obviously online. So, I think every organization is seeing an uptick in volunteers virtually, signups for different things virtually. You can, through the James Beard site, you can register for our newsletters, and that we often update employment opportunities or volunteer opportunities at a larger scale via our newsletter. And so if you subscribe to that, you'll get targeted updates. They're not, we don't currently have a virtual job bank yet.
Melissa, maybe a quick follow-up question for you is just, are you changing any of the onboarding process for these volunteers? Like, are you shortening that or simplifying it just because of the rushed need and high demand?
No, our onboarding is usually pretty simple, and it's really based around a conversation with one of our site leaders. And to your point, we're just looking to get them out to helping with the opportunity as quickly as possible. And definitely having the conversations around social distancing, pick up and drop off outside, gloves and masks.
Yeah, great. All right, I want to go back to Catherine. I think you're the one that started the conversation around policy as a solution area. There have been a couple questions on just how either individuals or organizations can support policy, especially if they're not focused on advocacy necessarily as an organization.
Yeah, and I think everybody probably has an opinion on this. I mean, I think policy is a lever for change and for the restaurant community, and certainly at this time of extreme need. We are seeing a lot of, I think, positive, I'm going to focus on the positive policy movements for folks. We see bills coming to fund additional community feeding coming up in the next, when Congress comes back in May. We're seeing bills to help supply loans to farmers and to restaurants and small businesses. I think everybody can be an advocate simply by amplifying or sharing the information that the different coalitions are pushing out. So for us, right now, a priority is Save Restaurants. It's a hashtag, Save Restaurants. It's really easy on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook to share those infographics. You can also download them at the jamesbeard.org website, which I will repeat ad nauseum during this seminar. But, so those resources are available. I think, there's a move on to help support and plus up, improve the funding for SNAP. And then I think it's also keeping an eye on other pieces of policy legislation. When Representative Pingree is on next week, and I will post the date in the chat for that webinar because somebody asked me that directly. But she is also focused on food waste. In addition to dealing with the emergency crises that are taking place and the emergency needs of COVID, we're also trying to keep our eye on larger balls related to, again, funding for SNAP, funding for food recovery programs, funding for food waste demonstration projects. So, everybody on this phone can do something, even if your organization is not maybe allowed to directly lobby. You can certainly share information. You can certainly share as individuals and amplify the great work being done out there. So for us, that's Save Restaurants, but certainly Hands Off SNAP is another great hashtag that a lot of folks are sharing and following. And there are others out there.
Great, thank you. One more reminder to participants, we are still getting lots of great questions. If anyone does have additional best practices that you want to share, feel free to be submitting those as well. Let's go back to the topic of volunteers for a second. Let me find this question. Melissa, maybe we'll start with you, but I think everyone could chime in here. There's a couple of questions that I think what we're trying to get at is, are there learnings from the last few weeks that has felt like an eternity? What is your perspective, if it's changed at all, on the role of volunteers versus labor throughout the supply chain, and has that changed at all just with the challenges that we faced in the last 6 weeks and the balance between those two?
Right. So for Food Rescue US, our model has always relied on volunteers. So it's hard for me to think about it from a labor perspective, but what I would say about that is that for us, what we're seeing is that people really do want to help. And I think what keeps people from being able to help in any forum is really around their time and their energy. And what we're finding is that people want to be out there volunteering with their families and teaching them more about what can be done and how you can help other people. And younger people are able to step up and want to be involved. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the time and flexibility that everybody has now.
I would say too that, so speaking from what we see, we have a lot of employees actually who want to volunteer and who typically do volunteer. Not really supporting retail food rescue pickups, but just volunteer at food banks. And I think one of the challenges is typically one of the ways we show up in our communities in difficult times is we host a big barbecue. We have a community meal. Well, we can't do that. Or we get a couple hundred people together and we pack meals at a food bank, and we can't do that either. So there's been some frustration because so many people would like to help. But so we've been keeping in close contact, and it varies a little bit from market to market. But I even, checked in with our folks in Cincinnati who, they're being very careful about volunteers in terms of PPE and sticking to kind of a smaller number of volunteers. And we also in Ohio have the National Guard helping pack meals here in Cincinnati.
Great.
So, but we do have this group of people who, to your point, Melissa, really want to help. And so, I think that's been a little bit of a challenge in addition to like our typical, working every day to run the business.
Great, thank you all. Denise, I'm actually going to go back to you really quick. Some questions about local kind of community-based food recovery organizations, and just any recommendations you have for how they can engage either with Kroger or other retailers in the community to support food recovery.
Yeah, so I can speak to a little bit of what we've seen related to our own food rescue programs. So, well, first of all, I would say we said from the beginning when we introduced Zero Hunger, Zero Waste that it would take everyone. And we need everyone to help to solve the problems related to food insecurity. So we appreciate what all of the folks on the line today and what everyone is doing to get meals to the people who need them. So that's for one thing, we truly believe that we can't do it alone. And so we're working with many partners. We do typically retail food rescue with the network of Feeding America affiliated food banks. But we've recognized and we've heard in some cases because of the pressures on volunteers and people who often volunteer being in those at-risk populations sometimes, if, for example, if they're retired, that it does put pressure on the charitable food system and the flow of food and the recovery of surplus food. So ultimately, we think that this may, this situation that we're in right now may help create a little bit of a more inclusive charitable food system of the future. And we certainly, we appreciate the others in our communities who are helping today and really appreciate what they're doing.
Great, thank you, Denise. Catherine, question for you, and again, others can chime in here. I think this is probably building on the comments you've already made about the program that was starting in Kentucky, but there's a question around kind of new models for local restaurants, such as kind of freezing and selling meals through retail, and just what the implications of those are on the labor force, if that's been a way to keep restaurant employees engaged throughout this time, or if there's other examples besides that model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are, one of the bright silver linings is innovation has come out of this crisis. And we've also seen some pretty rapid and direct changes to things like licensing related to liquor sales. So more and more restaurants are selling bottles of wine to go and cocktails to go. And, so there's some innovative things that are coming out of this that people will want to see stay. And I think another one of those, especially given many of the guidelines related to reopening that we're seeing across the country. So the Northeast Governors PAC, the Western States Governors PAC, the individual governors in the South who are all making decisions about when their states should reopen. And then the guidelines that is going to come with it. So in California, we know that the governor has said that restaurants may only be at 50% capacity, if that, maybe at 35% capacity, have to space tables 6 feet away. So all of that means that they're going to have to figure out how to diversify their revenue models, right? To hold on to the people that they've held on to during this crisis. The pivot to restaurant grocery stores, to more takeout, to feeding additional meals. We did a survey recently at the James Beard Foundation of our members, and about 30% of restaurants had changed their model to include either emergency feeding for hospital workers, school food centers, or feeding of restaurant workers. And that means that they're all looking at how they can do larger meals at scale, lots of takeaway, lots to go, to grab, those types of things. And so those innovations are happening. I think much like the other, my other panelists said, one of our first and foremost things about reopening and even staying open at this time, though, is the health and safety of our workforce. And so, you know, the social distancing guidelines, people 6 feet away in the kitchen, gloves, masks, temperature checks, all of that is in place now as these restaurants have built these models, and all are likely to be in place during the initial reopening of restaurants across the country. And so, you know, it's sort of the roundabout way to answer your question, which is there's a whole lot of innovation going on with restaurants, a whole lot of changes to delivery, to takeout, to meal programs, to being paid vendors for some of these community-based partners, to building that stuff up. And we are going to see a lot of that stay for at least 12 to 14 months, if not longer than that.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I would
Catherine.
say, I would just add,
yeah,
I think that's kind of maybe a little bit of light that we see through this process too, which is that so many people have so many creative, innovative ideas, and this is giving them a chance to shine a little bit. So we're excited to see that, for one thing, the folks we supported through our foundation's Innovation Fund are continuing to operate, and we've given them additional funds to expand and scale some of their great ideas. And then we think there will be even more that come to light through this process too.
Great. I'm going to do probably 2 more questions before we start wrapping up. The first, and this is for all of you, and I think we've heard a few examples already, but just want to make sure we hear all of them. Do your organizations have initiatives or strategies for connecting people who are unemployed because of the pandemic with work opportunities?
So at the James Beard Foundation, not a full scale of employment opportunities. We do have a resource available in our webinars. We have a great law firm, Arlen Porter, that is doing a lot of pro bono work, and so has created a whole set of resources for newly unemployed, guides on how to access unemployment benefits, guides on how to access SNAP, different ways to access benefit programs that they might not have been familiar with in the past. And then we are doing some informal networking, and as I said, listing things at a larger scale when we can via our newsletter. But for us, we're just, I'll be honest, we're really overwhelmed by the amount of people who are unemployed, and trying to figure out how we can highlight initiatives or things that they might seek out in their local community, and then give them the resources that they need to access the programs that they're really unfamiliar with.
Yeah, I would say we don't specifically have kind of a matchmaking program, but on any given day, anyone can go to jobs.kroger.com and see what jobs are available in their community. So if you live in one of our markets, we have 2,800 retail stores, we have 36 manufacturing plants, we have a network of warehouses and logistics and IT jobs. So I encourage, anyone can go and look and see what opportunities are available. And I think informally, there is definitely, a network. So the Kroger family and the Kroger team are out there connecting people even on an individual basis. I know I have for a few people.
And for Food Rescue US, it's really just staying connected to our food service providers and their networks, and understanding how we can help keep them in business by running these restaurant and community kitchen programs and keeping their employees working.
Great, thank you all. We have one last question, which is actually probably 4 or 5 questions here combined into one. I know something I'm very interested about, but I think simply put, what are we learning today that we can be applying after the crisis to build a more resilient food system when it comes to some of the labor challenges we've been facing? So a little more future looking, hopefully a little more optimistic. Just what are you seeing that we can apply long term? And if each of you could address that as kind of your closing comment, that would be great.
So I'll start. I think what we're seeing is that people are really stepping up with innovative solutions, as well as the generosity and support of community solutions. And for us, I hope that one of the things that really does come out of this, you know, Americans are very notable for their wanting to volunteer. And I think for us, we're looking at this, that hopefully with all of the community support we've gotten, that people will come out of this thinking more finite about the food system and about where their food is coming from, and where and what goes into bringing food to restaurant tables and to grocery stores. And I'm mostly moved throughout our organization. We're saying that in all of our communities, we're so humbled by the generosity and support of people out across America, and how they're looking to help one another, not only in food recovery, but in anything that they can possibly do.
I can go. So from my perspective, I think we're used to operating all hands on deck all the time, and we often in our communications to our associates, especially in the last several years, have talked about being resilient and embracing change. But you know, the speed of change of this situation is, I think, teaching us a little bit about truly being resilient and being able to pivot quickly, to make decisions faster, to maybe get through a stage of piloting something faster so it can be scaled more quickly, and understanding that when it doesn't work, just stop it. Like, not everything that you pilot is going to work, but I think it's going to be hard. And as we've talked about recovery, and you know, anyone who wants to look at how we've shared lessons learned to date, it's available in the blueprint that is now online. It's called A Blueprint for Businesses, to help people as our communities think about reopening, because you know, we understand there's a lot to think about. So we don't know everything. We've shared a few of the things we've learned and a few of the things that we've had to contemplate. But ultimately, I think it is a little bit of being able to move quickly and embrace the change, and also recognize and reward people for the work they are doing. I mean, I think I am inspired every day by all of our frontline workers, but particularly healthcare workers, our own grocery associates, the volunteers that are really running the charitable food system on any given day, in addition to our food bank and agency partners. It's been really gratifying to see how much everyone cares. So I do think this is bringing to light, unfortunately, the urgent need that has increased, and hopefully we will find solutions maybe a little bit more quickly.
Yeah, no, I just would echo Emma and Melissa's comments. I mean, I think what gives me great hope every day, I'm hugely inspired by the chef and restaurant and food community. We have an informal saying at the James Beard Foundation, which I can't fully say on this webinar, but it's that, you know, chefs know how to get done, right? Every day can bring a crisis, and but they are also some of the first to volunteer their time, their resources, their energy for every bake sale, fundraiser, and community-based piece. And that didn't change with this. Even while they were watching their businesses close, while they were laying people off, while they were furloughing people, while they were telling their farmers that they weren't going to be able to pay them, they were trying to figure out ways to keep their local food system humming and to keep people fed. And that, to me, just gives me hope every day And, I think what we're learning is that, and I think what we're learning is a new way to talk about our food system. I think food advocates, whether from food rescue or food waste or SNAP or farmers, have always been looking for a way to demonstrate the linkages between the food in our oceans and our fields, and how that gets all the way to the plate at the table and all the way back again through the cycle of the food system. And everybody now knows where their food comes from. And everybody has a sense of how fragile our own food security is, our own food sovereignty is. And so I'm very excited about the innovations and hopeful of the ones that will stick, and then just inspired every single day by how our entire food system community has rallied and met this challenge to make sure that people have enough to eat, that our farmers are paid, and that our small businesses return.
Thank you. Well, let me just end with a huge thank you to everyone who's joined and all the work that you're doing, and especially for our panelists today for being willing to take the time and to share what they're working on as well. We'll have a written recap and the recording available on our website in the coming days. Nathan is also going to be chatting a survey link through that chat function to each of you that are still on the webinar. We'll also send that out in the recap. But would love to hear your feedback, as well as any best practices or questions that you didn't get to ask during the call today, as well as topics of interest for future calls. And then next week, the fun continues, and we will be talking about safety, specifically safe operations in food handling during this pandemic. So same time on Wednesday, we'll be back at it again. But until then, we hope that all of you have a great day, and that everyone has the best health and sanity as we're all needed as we work through these changing times. So thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.